If most of your Navy time you had worked in the communications, they made you a radioman. You know, so then I had to go to the radioman A school, even though I was like a first-class petty officer. And I went mainly to learn the code. You had to learn the code.
Yeah.
Which was really hard because I'm tone deaf. And the code is a tone, you know, and so in order to read it, it was tough. But I did it. So then I became a radioman and went to Hawaii as a radioman, first class.
Yeah.
And then I went to the radioman school, radioman B school, which really qualified you to take the exam for chief.
Yeah.
Which I did, and I passed it. And then I was sent to, well, then I went to Washington.
Yeah, so in Hawaii you were in Honolulu, I presume?
Yeah.
And what was the
Pearl
name?
Harbor.
Pearl Harbor
Pearl
is
Harbor, yeah.
still a Navy base, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were at the headquarters of, it was called Sinknell. And they were like in charge of the Pacific Fleet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it must have been luxurious being in Hawaii for someone who loves the sun, right?
Yeah, I did like it, yeah. We lived in the barracks, but the barracks was really nice. By that time, I was a first-class petty officer, so I had my own room, a really big room, and shared a bath with someone who had a room on the other side.
Yeah.
And it was like almost like a bed sitting room, you know. And I worked watches round the clock, so when I would get off like a mid-watch, I would just grab my bathing suit and go downtown. And there was a hotel right next to Fort Jerussi, motel. And they thought I lived there because I would go right to the pool, and the guys would bring me towels, and, you know. And so I would sleep there next to the pool. I really took advantage of it. Of course, I probably ruined my skin, but I had a really great tan
I'll bet.
while I was there.
And that was in the 60s during the Kennedy administration?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Were you active in politics at all?
No.
I guess you couldn't be as active duty.
No, you couldn't be, no.
Yeah.
But you kept up with it. You know who the commander-in-chief was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we all just loved Kennedy because he was a naval officer.
And you voted. You would send absentee ballot home, I presume?
Yeah, yeah.
What about just being near Pearl Harbor? It wasn't yet a memorial site, was it in the...
Yeah, they had the memorial there.
Yeah.
And what disturbed me is that by this time, they had Japanese ships coming in, and the Japanese sailors would shop at the exchange in Pearl Harbor. And that used to really upset me. You know. And I never wanted to go to Japan, and I had plenty of opportunities. You know, there were always flights going over there. I am sorry I didn't go to Australia when I had the chance, because it was you're so much closer when you're in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember Pearl Harbor when it happened? Or at least your parents' reaction to it?
No, I remember it, yeah. Yeah.
What is your memory? The radio report or newspapers?
Yeah. Radio. It was on a Sunday. And you were scared.
Yeah. Were your parents upset?
I don't remember that, because my father wouldn't have had to worry about having to go because he'd already served and he had children, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So they weren't as upset. But they explained it to us in school the next day about what it meant. But then actually the war you had rationing.
Yeah.
And you had tickets, like if you wanted butter or anything, you had to use your ration tickets. We didn't have a car, so it didn't matter to us that you couldn't get gas.
Yeah. What about air drills and that sort of thing?
We did have that, and we had blackouts. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it didn't have a great impact. You collected things like for the war effort, and you bought stamps and war bonds and stuff like that.
Right. Were you in Hawaii at the time that the Kennedy was assassinated?
No, I was in San Diego by then.
Okay. Tell me your memory of, what were you doing and how did you find out about that?
Well, they called me. I was home, and they called me and just said to report to work right away. So I didn't know what it was, and I didn't have the radio on, and I just went into work, and then I found out then. So everyone was called back to work because you never knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, and you were kept very busy because things were up in the air, and everyone was upset, and you didn't know what it meant, and were the Russians behind it and all.
So you were placed on high alert.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you recall watching the television coverage of that?
Oh, yes.
Over the next few days?
Yes. Yeah.
Flags were at half staff, I'm sure, at all the military bases.
Yeah.
Well, what was San Diego like?
Well, what do you mean?
Yeah, I guess you went there after Hawaii, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And you went to Radioman B school?
Yeah. And then after I graduated from the school, I was stationed there.
Yeah.
In, naval headquarters there. And I really I wasn't crazy about San Diego because Hawaii was so beautiful with so many flowers, and San Diego was dry, and you didn't even see grass. They had stones, like colored stones in the front lawn.
Yeah.
And palm trees. So it was not nearly as pretty as Hawaii. So I loved Hawaii. So I really wasn't crazy about San Diego. And then from there I went to Washington, D.C., CNO headquarters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you stationed in the Pentagon at that time?
Yeah. And that was really busy because Vietnam was by this time at its height. And oh Lord, you would work your 8 hours, and then you couldn't really leave. The next crew would come on, but the traffic had to be down to a certain level before you could leave, and sometimes you'd work another 8 hours before you could leave. So you were just so tired all the time.
By traffic, you mean radio traffic?
Yeah, messages.
Yeah.
That went everywhere, to all through the Pentagon, yeah. Because this was the Chief of Naval Operations headquarters.
Yeah. Where did you live in Washington, D.C.?
Arlington. Yeah, not too far from the Pentagon, actually. It was on the main boulevard. Not too far up on Arlington. I know they're gone now, but it was a great big, massive apartment complex.
Okay.
On the left-hand side. As you're going up, what was it, Arlington Boulevard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably.
And I had a car, so I would drive to work. And I don't know, I always parked at the Pentagon, and I know I wasn't supposed to. Somehow I got away with it.
Yeah.
I probably could have taken a subway if I'd known enough.
They may not have had it at that point.
Yeah.
The metro was built, I think, in the mid-70s.
Well, then they didn't have it, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you were doing messages during the Vietnam War, these would be from field messages from the field, or?
Yeah, from Vietnam, and God, they had so many. They had this thing about counting their kills, which you find out later was all a lie anyhow.
Yeah.
But they would make up these figures, and it just generated all kinds of traffic all the time.
And you would do what? Encrypt them, or?
No, well, they would come through. Let me see. I don't remember encrypting them.
But you get them to the right place when they came in.
Yeah, we just would deliver them all through the Pentagon and route them to different places who had connections with us. Yeah, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff were there in the Pentagon. And I don't know if CNO was at that time was the head of the Joint Chiefs.
Mm.
But I know it was just awfully busy all the time.
Yeah. And from Washington D.C. then where?
Back to Pittsburgh on recruiting duty.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was really glad to get back. And by this time, they had the new federal building, which is now the old federal building, I guess. Yeah.
And you wanted to get 20 years in, right? At that point, you were getting very close to your 20-year anniversary.
Yeah. Well, I never wanted to get out. You know, I just liked it each time I would re-enlist because I didn't want to do anything else. But I really didn't think about, you know, trying to get 20, you know, but and then recruiting was, well, it was during the Vietnam War, so recruiting was not that easy. It was easier for the Navy than anyone else because when they would get their draft notice, they would run down and join the Navy, the guys. And but the women, you know, a lot of them were, you know, anti-war, you know, and they were always down around the federal building. If you go in or out, and they would be picketing you and
Sure.
Baby killer. Yeah.
Those were tough years for the military, I'm sure of it.
Yeah, it was. It was.
And then what happened? Did your parents got into some bad health at that point when you came back to Pittsburgh?
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, well, it happened right after, when I left Pittsburgh, I went to Bainbridge, Maryland, to the Radioman A School, and I was a counselor at the A School. And I'd only been there maybe 4 or 5 months when my father had the first stroke. And I knew that something was wrong with my mother, but no one else admitted it yet, you know. And so that did it. She couldn't take care of him at all. And so I would come back every weekend, but it became obvious that I had to be there, you know.
Yeah.
So actually I was going to retire, but I didn't have quite enough in. You had to have 19 years and 6 months in order to retire and get a pension.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I had to come home, so I put in my retirement papers, and someone called me from the Pentagon, some chief. He said, "What do you mean?" You know, I had 3 months. So he said, "Let me see what I can do."
Oh, and he got you into recruiting. Boy, was that a kind gesture, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
He sent me to, not recruiting, to the Reserve Training Center.
Boy, he was a lifesaver, huh?
Yeah.
He kind of saw that wouldn't have been enough to get your pension, all of the work you had done.
Yeah.
So you worked out near the airport?
No, Forbes Avenue in Oakland,
Oh, okay.
Reserve Training Center.
Is that still there?
No.
Okay.
And I ran a library. And I didn't even have to go in. You know, maybe once a week I would go in and just check things out. And that was for about a year.
And that let you take care of your parents at
Yeah.
that time?
Yeah.
So your dad had a major stroke, and then was his speech affected?
Well, he couldn't walk. He was in a hospital bed on the first floor. And, no, his speech wasn't affected, just the one side. But he couldn't walk. And then he had a series of strokes. And my mother had Alzheimer's.
You say she wasn't diagnosed, but you knew she had some dementia.
They called it senile dementia.
Yeah.
I don't even think they had the title Alzheimer's at that time. And then she died of a heart attack. So,
Did she die first or your dad?
she did.
Yeah. And they were, the last home they lived in was Hastings Street?
Yeah.
So you stayed there, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, and I went to school. And, boy, actually, I was there like 28 years.
Well, yeah. What made you choose? Well, I guess you wanted to stay in Pittsburgh. Is that why you chose Pitt to get your degree?
Yeah, it was just seemed logical because I had the home and
Yeah.
it was all furnished and, you know, so.
Was it GI Bill that helped you with school?
Yes, yeah. And it was a lot less expensive then too, to go.
Did you go immediately into your master's program, or did that come later?
Well, I had to get the undergraduate degree first.
Yeah, but I mean, did you go sequentially right into it?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Because I finished the undergraduate work in 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I had taken, there was a test you could take that you would earn credits, and I earned 60 credits.
Yeah.
So that made me a junior. So, and then the master's program was only a year, but it was, you know, full-time for the whole year. And I got into that, and it was an experimental program. I was lucky because they wanted a different types of people, you know, and they would have, like, one of the guys was a black guy that didn't have any education, and he was a recovering narcotic, you know, and so they were training counselors, and that with life experience, they said they wanted people that could already counsel.
Yeah.
And then they just taught them, you know, the theories. Well, I had been a counselor in the Navy. That's what I did at the school. So it worked out well.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was tight with the money, but, you know, always the rent was real cheap. And your mother kept slipping me 20.
Yeah. So your parents were humble people. They didn't have a family money or anything like that.
Well, my father did on his side.
Yeah, but you didn't
never
fall
saw
into
it.
inheritance.
No. No.
So when you finished at Pitt, was your first job out at Boyce?
Yes, I was offered a job at Pitt. I was working for a guy who was the head of the criminal justice department, and he wanted me to stay with him as a counselor. But I can remember the details, and I wanted to stay. I liked him, and but the most he could get me was $9,000 a year, and Boyce offered me $12,000, and I said I just can't turn it down. So I took the Boyce job.
Yeah.
And that was at a time where the dean said to me, there's all these women around the campus and I don't know what they're doing here. I don't know where they come from or what they want. So just that was women returning to school for the first time.
Yeah.
So I was called the mature student counselor. And I worked with the women coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's just a common thing.
I remember just spending some time out at Boyce. At the time, I think Mom went back to school
Yeah, she
while
did.
you were there, and
Uh-huh.
Sheila was in school there for some time. I think she
Colleen.
met Willis there.
Did.
Colleen went there.
Teresa.
Yeah.
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 It was handy because going from Hastings Street, driving, I was against the traffic, so it was always clear going and coming back. You know.
True. Yeah. What made you decide to hang your own shingle at one point?
Well, it seemed like I got so used to only being in some place for 2 years. I got bored and I kept, like I'd open a letter and I think, oh, maybe it's my orders. No. That's it, I think. I just got bored after 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you were there for longer than 2 years, weren't you?
Maybe 3 or 4. Not much longer than that, though.
Yeah. So tell me how the tradition of nephews and nieces coming to live with you started.
Well, it really started when my mother and father were living.
Yeah.
Because they always had, the kids came to the grandparents' home, you know, in the summer. And then they kept coming after they died. So.
Who was the first to come live with you?
Well, coming for the summer and all started with Teresa. Teresa and then Kathy, and they came every summer. And then Mark and Beth would come every summer. And the first one that came to live with me, I believe, was, Teresa and Kathy, when they got ready to go to college, and I had gotten the information for Chatham, for Kathy, really, and she filled out all the papers and she got accepted at Chatham, but she didn't want to live with me. She wanted to live on campus.
Sure.
And she was able to get, like, a scholarship for it. But Teresa didn't, and she couldn't get the scholarship. So she came and lived with me and went to Boyce, where it was much cheaper. So she took her first 2 years there.
Yeah.
Then she went to Slippery Rock. And then by that time, she was entitled to, Spanish speaking, she got help.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember attending one event with Kathy at Chatham. It was a formal event. We all went to have dinner there one night. I don't know if you remember that.
Vaguely.
Yeah. It's a nice time.
Yeah, I saw a lot of her while she was there, And, but she was happier living on campus.
Yeah. It's a beautiful campus.
Yeah.
It's like a little oasis in the middle of the city. You don't even know it's there if you don't look.
Mm-hmm.
And then Colleen, I guess, at some point came down to live there.
A couple different times.
Yeah.
And then Beth came when she graduated from high school. And then Mark came when he graduated from college.
Yeah, and Mark stayed with you, I guess, when he first started with Vista, right?
Yeah, till they got married.
Yeah. And met Sheila Worth at Vista.
Yeah. And he started the Northside Community Development Corporation. While he was in Vista, he wrote the program for that and got a federal funding. And then when he was done with Vista, they hired him. He worked with them for a while. And then he was, he had such great ideas. And he just went on. He started with Rubinoff, just the two of them, and Mary Ann in one little office. Started with Washington's Landing. He would, like, as a developer, he gets the idea, and then he gets other people to put up the money.
Yeah.
And then went on to Somerset and a lot of other things. He builds, outside of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.